The sleek private jet gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the aviation hangar, a monument to wealth and power that seemed almost obscene in its perfection. Marcus Thompson stood beneath it in his oil-stained coveralls, his weathered hands clutching a worn toolbox that had seen better days, while above him, Victoria Ashford stood on the aircraft stairs in her pristine designer suit, her lips curled in barely concealed contempt. She had built an empire worth $3 billion before turning 40, and she had no patience for incompetence, especially not from some small-town mechanic who looked like he'd wandered in from a roadside garage. What she didn't know was that the man she was about to humiliate carried secrets that would shake everything she thought she knew about strength, skill, and the true measure of a person's worth. If you believe in the power of second chances, in kindness over judgment, and in the strength of those who keep going despite impossible odds, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and redemption to the world. Victoria's voice echoed through the cavernous hangar with the sharp edge of someone accustomed to immediate obedience. She had called the maintenance company 3 times already, demanding their best technician, and this was what they sent her, this tired-looking man with shadows under his eyes and grease permanently embedded under his fingernails. She made no effort to hide her disappointment, as she informed him that her jet needed to be flight-ready within 2 hours for a critical business meeting in New York, and that she expected nothing less than perfection. Marcus simply nodded, his quiet demeanor only seeming to irritate her further. She asked him if he even had experience with luxury aircraft, her tone dripping with skepticism, and when he softly replied that he had some experience, she laughed, a cold sound that bounced off the metal walls. She told him not to waste her time, that she would be watching his every move, and that if he damaged anything, she would ensure he never worked on aircraft again. What Victoria couldn't see was the exhaustion that went bone-deep in Marcus, the kind that came from working double shifts for 18 months straight, while raising 2 young daughters alone. His wife, Sarah, had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving him with Emma, age 7, and Sophie, age 5, and a mountain of medical bills that had swallowed their savings and then some. He had once been one of the most respected aerospace engineers in the country, working on classified military projects and cutting-edge aircraft design. But when Sarah got sick, he'd left that world behind to be with his family. After her death, the prestigious firms wouldn't take him back, said he'd been out of the game too long, so he'd taken whatever work he could find to keep his daughters fed and their small apartment heated. He worked at Joe's aviation repair during the day and did freelance mechanical work at night, sleeping maybe 4 hours if he was lucky, haunted by the memory of promises he'd made to his daughters about keeping them safe and together. Marcus moved around the jet with quiet efficiency, his trained eyes catching things that most mechanics would miss. He noticed a hairline fracture in one of the hydraulic lines, a manufacturing defect so subtle it would have gone undetected until mid-flight, when it would have catastrophically failed. Victoria watched him work with growing impatience, checking her diamond-encrusted watch repeatedly and making snide comments about his pace. She questioned whether he was qualified to even touch her aircraft, suggested that perhaps he should stick to fixing old propeller planes, and wondered aloud why the company had sent their janitor instead of a real technician. Marcus absorbed each insult without response, his focus never wavering from his work. He was used to being underestimated, used to being invisible, used to the way people looked through him rather than at him. Then Victoria made a critical mistake. Frustrated by his silence and convinced he was incompetent, she decided to take matters into her own hands. She climbed into the cockpit and began running through the pre-flight systems herself, determined to prove that her jet was fine and that this mechanic was wasting her valuable time. But when she activated the hydraulic system, the defective line that Marcus had been carefully isolating suddenly ruptured under pressure, sending a spray of fluid across the hangar floor. The jet lurched dangerously to one side, and Victoria, in her panic, accidentally engaged the emergency brake release, causing the entire aircraft to begin rolling backward toward the hangar wall. For a woman who controlled boardrooms and commanded respect from the most powerful people in business, she was suddenly completely helpless, frozen in terror as tons of metal machinery rolled toward disaster. Marcus moved like lightning. He sprinted to the main landing gear, wedged his toolbox under the wheel, and then, in a display of knowledge that seemed impossible for a simple mechanic, he accessed an emergency override panel hidden beneath the fuselage. His hands flew across controls that most people didn't even know existed, entering a complex sequence that only someone with deep aerospace engineering knowledge would possess. Within seconds, he had manually engaged the backup braking system and stabilized the aircraft just feet from the wall. The hangar fell silent except for Victoria's ragged breathing as she climbed down from the cockpit, her face pale and her hands shaking. She stared at Marcus as he calmly picked up his toolbox and returned to documenting the hydraulic failure, and she realized with dawning horror that she had completely misjudged this man. Her voice was different now, smaller and uncertain, as she asked him how he knew about that override system. Marcus continued working as he quietly explained that he used to design aircraft like this one, that he held 3 patents on aviation safety systems, and that he'd worked on some of the most advanced aerospace projects in the country before his life had taken him in a different direction. He didn't say it with pride or resentment, just simple fact, the way someone might mention they used to live in a different city. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest, some armor she'd worn for so long she'd forgotten it was there. She asked him why he was working as a mechanic if he had that kind of background, and Marcus paused, his hands stilling on his tools. He told her about Sarah, about the daughters waiting for him at his neighbor's apartment, about medical bills and broken dreams, and the simple mathematics of survival that had rewritten his entire life. If this story has touched your heart, if you've ever felt invisible or judged for circumstances beyond your control, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below telling us about a time when someone surprised you with their hidden strength. Victoria sat down on a tool chest, her expensive suit forgotten, and for the first time in years, she really listened. She learned that Marcus's daughters were brilliant, that Emma wanted to be an astronaut, and Sophie dreamed of building robots, that he spent his few free hours helping them with science projects at their tiny kitchen table. She learned that he'd sold his awards and certificates to pay for his wife's funeral, that he worked 70-hour weeks and still sometimes couldn't afford to buy his daughter's new shoes. And she learned that despite everything, despite the grief and exhaustion and constant struggle, he had never once considered his old life more important than being there for his children, had never resented the sacrifice, had never stopped showing up with patience and love even when the world showed him neither. Something fundamental shifted in Victoria Ashford that day in the hangar. She made a phone call right there, to the head of her company's aerospace division, and within a week, Marcus had been offered a position as their lead safety engineer, with a salary that would finally let him breathe, let him come home before his daughters went to bed, let him give them the stability they deserved. But more than that, Victoria had learned a lesson that no business school had ever taught her about the difference between a person's circumstances and their worth, about the quiet heroism of those who keep going when everything has fallen apart, and about the danger of judging someone's value by the temporary chapters of their story rather than the full measure of their character. Marcus Thompson had saved her life twice that day, once from a crashing jet and once from a hardened heart that had forgotten how to see people as anything more than their immediate usefulness. And in the end, that second rescue was perhaps the more important one. Please share this story with someone who needs a reminder that their worth isn't defined by their struggles, and that sometimes the most extraordinary people are hidden in the most ordinary moments.